It was on an ordinary Tuesday when the extraordinary crashed into my life. The Obsidian Bar, hidden on the 20th floor of a building in Manhattan, wasn't usually part of my scene. Places like that, with drinks that had weird names and dudes in perfect suits, belonged to a whole other world than mine. But there I was, slouched in a leather chair, trying to look comfortable while watching the city through these floor-to-ceiling windows. The invitation came from a coworker who insisted I needed to broaden my horizons. At 30, my routine in New York was just a cramped apartment in Queens, an office downtown, and occasionally hitting up a noisy pub with old friends. Not bad, just predictable. Then he walked in. The silence didn't hit like in the movies, not dramatic or immediate. I just noticed several eyes turning subtly toward the entrance. A tall guy with tan skin wearing a custom-tailored dark suit. There was something about his presence that seemed to make the space around him bend. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you get access to more stories like this. Our eyes met for just a second, but it felt like he read every page of my life in that brief moment. I went back to staring at my glass, suddenly aware that my shirt was a bit off kilter after a full day's work. My coworker leaned in. "That's Benjamin Blackwood. They say he bought half a country in the Middle East just because he liked the view." I shrugged, pretending not to care, though something kept pulling my eyes back to him. Benjamin was now chatting with the bartender like they were old pals. His gestures were measured, elegant. I noticed a gold ring on his left hand, but it didn't look like a wedding band. When I decided it was time to leave, I found out that my tab had already been taken care of. The bartender just nodded discreetly toward the table where Benjamin had been sitting, which was now empty. On the back of the receipt was a phone number and a message. "The real taste of New York isn't in the obvious bars." For 3 days, I carried that number like it was a secret. For 3 nights, I typed it into my phone only to delete it before sending any message. What was a guy like Benjamin Blackwood doing interested in someone like me? On Friday, he found me. I was leaving the office when a black Mercedes pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. "Christopher Myers," he said, as if my name was some declaration of importance. "Mind if I give you a ride?" Inside the car, the silence was almost physical. Benjamin didn't seem to mind at all. His fingers drummed softly on his knee as he looked out the window at the city. "How did you know where to find me?" I finally asked. A slight smile touched his lips. "New York's smaller than it looks when you know the right people." It should have sounded like a warning, but there was something hypnotically honest in his voice that clashed with the invasive nature of the gesture. "I've got a proposition," Benjamin said when the car pulled up in front of a low-key cafe in the village. "How about you grab a coffee with me?" The cafe looked normal on the outside, but inside it was a different world. The staff moved with the precision of dancers. Benjamin led me to a table in the back, greeting everyone by name as they passed by. "You're not from around here," I said as we sat down. "Really obvious?" He grinned, showing off perfectly aligned teeth. "I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm in New York on business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that lets me meet interesting people." His deep brown eyes locked onto mine. "Like you." There was something about that intense attention that threw me off. I wasn't interesting. I was just a mid-level financial analyst with a perfectly ordinary life. Why me? The question slipped out before I could hold it back. Benjamin took a sip of his coffee before answering. "The most fascinating people are the ones who don't even realize their own worth." He paused. "Besides, you were the only one in the bar who didn't try to figure out who I was or what I had." Our coffee stretched on for hours. Benjamin talked about speaking 5 languages, diving into coral reefs, and picking olives on a farm in Greece. Every story sounded too wild to be true, and yet the way he told them, with vivid details and the occasional hesitation, made it impossible not to believe him. When we said goodbye on the sidewalk, it was already night. Benjamin handed me a card with his address. "I'm staying at the Plaza. Dinner tomorrow? There's a restaurant on the 20th floor that serves the best lamb you'll ever have." I tucked the card in my pocket, trying to ignore the heat rising in my neck. It was just dinner, between 2 people who sort of knew each other. Nothing more. But as I walked to the subway, I felt like something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of my life, as if gravity itself had subtly changed its pull. The Plaza Hotel oozed opulence from every inch of its facade. I crossed the lobby feeling like an imposter, aware of the discreet glances from the staff who could surely tell the difference between a guest and a regular visitor. The private elevator required a special card, which Benjamin had left for me at reception, along with a handwritten note. "Looking forward to our night. B." Benjamin's suite took up half the floor. When the door opened, I wasn't greeted by him, but by a man in a dark suit with a neutral expression who, after checking my name, led me down a hallway decorated with artwork that looked too original to belong in a hotel. Benjamin was on the balcony, facing away from me, speaking in a language I assumed was Arabic. His voice sounded different, harder, more commanding. When he noticed me, he abruptly ended the call and turned around with a smile that completely transformed his expression. "Christopher, right on time, like a Swiss watch." He moved in, lightly touching my shoulder. "Hope you don't mind, but I've changed our plans. The restaurant's going to be too packed tonight. I asked the chef to whip up something special for us here." The table was set on a private terrace overlooking Central Park. Strategically placed lights created an intimate vibe, and a bottle of wine was already breathing beside porcelain dishes. "Is this how you live all the time?" I asked, unable to hide my amazement as I sat down. Benjamin poured the wine with the kind of ease that came from years of practice. "What do you mean by like this? Like the world's some stage built just for you?" He laughed, a genuine sound that contrasted sharply with the sophistication around us. "If you knew where I came from, you'd understand why I treasure moments like these." Over dinner, Benjamin talked about faraway cities like he was discussing neighborhood hangouts. Istanbul, Cairo, Marrakech. He described them not as tourist spots, but as backdrops for deals, secret meetings, and powerful connections. "And you?" he finally asked after describing a sunset in Cappadocia. "What does Christopher Myers do when he's not being swept up by strangers in fancy cars?" My life suddenly felt way too small to share. What could I say? That I spent hours poring over spreadsheets? That my biggest rush in a week was a college pizza night with friends who mostly talked about mortgages and retirement plans? "I just live," I replied simply. "Not like you, but I have my own kind of existence." Something shifted in Benjamin's expression. A softening, maybe even admiration. "There's an honesty in you that's rare, Christopher. Most people try to impress me." After dinner, he suggested we finish the last glass back in the room. As I headed toward the couch, I noticed a door slightly ajar, leading to what looked like an improvised office. On the table lay an open passport. I wouldn't have noticed anything odd if it weren't for the glimpse of a name on the page. It wasn't Benjamin Blackwood. I quickly looked away as he came over with the glasses, but something in my expression must have given it away. "See anything interesting?" Benjamin asked, his tone still light but with an undercurrent of tension. "Just enjoying the view," I lied, taking the glass he offered. Benjamin sat down, not beside me, but in the armchair opposite, studying me over the rim of his glass. The silence between us now carried a different weight. "Is there something about me you'd like to know, Christopher?" Benjamin finally asked, placing his glass on the coffee table with deliberate slowness. I swallowed hard. "Who are you, really?" An enigmatic smile played on his lips. "Who do you think I am? Someone not called Benjamin Blackwood." He didn't seem surprised, just gave a slight nod of recognition. "Names are just masks we wear, some for protection, others for convenience." "Lies, you mean?" I shot back, feeling a mix of disappointment and apprehension building in my chest. Benjamin, or whoever he really was, leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. When we met, what did you see? A rich guy? An exotic foreigner? A temporary fling?" The question caught me off guard. What had I seen, really? A man who, for some inexplicable reason, had noticed me when I felt practically invisible in my own life. "I saw someone different from anyone I'd ever met," I answered more honestly than I'd planned. His dark eyes locked onto mine. "So, who I am matters less than what I am to you." Before I could answer, Benjamin's phone rang. He checked the screen and his face changed, the softness vanishing in an instant. He answered, speaking in a low, tense voice. When he hung up, his expression was composed again, but something had shifted. "I have to go to Miami tomorrow," he announced. "Urgent business. I need you to come with me." It wasn't exactly a casual invitation. It was somewhere between a request and a necessity. The man in front of me now looked like he was carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. "Why?" I asked, confused by the sudden change. "Because in 3 days you managed to bring some color back into a world I'd seen in black and white for so long," he replied. Then, his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And because maybe I need someone I can trust." The private jet was smaller than I'd imagined, but still way more luxurious than any plane I'd ever been on. The crew, just a pilot and a flight attendant, greeted me like I'd been part of that world for years. Benjamin kept his distance during the flight, alternating between tense phone calls and long periods just looking out the window. When I tried to ask what was going to happen in Miami, he just smiled weakly. Boring business. You can enjoy the beach while I handle a few things. The resort in South Beach took up an entire stretch of the coast. Our suite overlooked the ocean on one side and the city on the other. Benjamin disappeared shortly after we arrived, leaving me with a corporate credit card and instructions to enjoy everything the hotel has to offer. I spent the day between the pool and the beach, trying not to think too much about how absurd the situation was. I had ditched my job, asked for emergency leave, my apartment, and my routine to follow a man who was probably lying about who he was. Logic said I should be terrified, but I just felt this strange calm, like I had finally broken out of an aquarium and was swimming in the open ocean. Scary, but real. Benjamin came back as night fell, visibly tense despite the forced smile. During dinner on the terrace of our suite, I noticed he kept checking his phone and occasionally glancing at the door. Something's not right, I stated, not as a question. He hesitated, his fingers drumming on the table, the same nervous gesture I'd seen in the car in New York. Nothing you need to worry about. If there's nothing to worry about, you wouldn't be checking that door every half minute. Benjamin sighed, finally dropping the act. There are people who don't want me in the States right now. Dangerous people. What kind of business do you really do? He considered the question for a moment. The kind that involves governments, information, and sometimes unofficial diplomacy. So, are you some kind of spy? A genuine smile appeared on his face for the first time that day. Nothing so glamorous. Let's just say I facilitate communications between parties that officially shouldn't be talking to each other. Before I could wrap my head around that, Benjamin's phone rang again. The color drained from his face as he listened. When he hung up, he was already on his feet. We have to go. Now. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you get access to more stories like this. The next few minutes were a blur. Benjamin stuffed our stuff into bags while he talked quickly on the phone. In Arabic, no less. A helicopter was already waiting for us at the hotel's helipad when we slipped out through a service entrance, escorted by two suited men who didn't even introduce themselves. "What's going on?" I asked as we were airborne, flying over Miami. Benjamin grabbed my hand, his fingers icy despite the warm night. "Someone found out I'm here. Someone with the resources to make our stay permanent." The helicopter took us to a small private airport where another jet was waiting, engines already running. As we crossed the runway, I looked at Benjamin, really looked at him. And I didn't see the powerful, confident man from that Manhattan bar, but someone vulnerable, backed into a corner, yet still determined. "You don't have to come with me," he said when we stopped at the foot of the plane's stairs. The wind from the rotor still ruffled his perfectly styled hair. "I can get you back to New York. Your life can go on exactly as it was before. Just a week ago, I was simply Christopher Myers, the financial analyst, the routine guy. Now I was at an underground airstrip, fleeing from unspecified dangers with a man whose real name I didn't even know." "Who are you?" I asked one last time, needing something real to hold on to. He smiled, a sad smile. "My name is Karim Al-Fayez. I'm the son of a Saudi diplomat and an American teacher. I grew up between two worlds, never really belonging to either." He paused. "And for the last 3 days, I've been just a man trying to escape his own labyrinth with someone who, by some miracle, seems to see past the walls." The pilot shouted that we needed to take off immediately. In the distance, lights from vehicles were closing in fast around the airport's perimeter. "What's it gonna be, Christopher? Back to your old life or a leap into the unknown?" I looked back at the path that would lead me back to my safe, predictable, contained existence. Then I looked at the plane, at Karim's anxious face, at the endless possibilities stretching out before me. In the end, the decision was surprisingly easy. "So, where are we going?" I asked, climbing the steps of the jet. Karim, no longer Benjamin, smiled, following me into the aircraft. "To a safe place. A place where nobody knows us." The door closed behind us, sealing our fate. As the jet sped down the runway, I didn't feel fear, just a crystal clear clarity. I'd lived for 30 years. Now, at last, I was about to really start living. The jet took off, leaving behind the lights of Miami, the outline of my old life, and all those certainties I once believed defined who I was. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you get access to more stories like this.